What's good everyone, it's Zigzag here, welcome back to another Geoguessr video. Today I'm going to be showing you guys 13 unique regions from around the world that are very distinct within their own countries. So let me just jump straight into it here so you guys know what I mean. The first one here is northwest Peru. So we can see here on a relief map that Peru is a very mountainous country, especially along the west coast. But if you come up here to the northwest, you can see that there is a whole plateau, which is simultaneously dry like the rest of the west of Peru, but also it is flat. So this is kind of how it looks. It looks like the rest of Peru, but just without the mountains, and you can easily get a good score by identifying it. Here is another example. You often have these very dry and thin trees, and yeah, you can see some hills, but they're generally speaking nothing like the mountains that you get in the rest of Peru, so it is really distinctive, and recognizing it can make for a really high score. By the way, guys, I'm going to make a map for practicing just with a few locations from each of these regions, so check that out in the description. Also, don't forget to give the video a like, it helps me out in the algorithm a lot. Okay, next one here, we are talking about Jeju Island in South Korea. So when you look at the distance between the main peninsula of South Korea and Jeju Island, you would expect there to be some differences. Well, the main differences are in the soil color. Over here, you can see that we have that very volcanic black soil and black rocks on this island that you simply would not see on the mainland. It makes it quite easy to recognize, in my opinion. Then also, to go along with that, with this black soil you see on the side of the road, we also have black rocks, and they often have black rock walls on the side of the roads in Jeju. You won't see it every round, but it's really quite common. And when you see these and you know it's Korea, you can basically instantly go to Jeju Island and get a really nice score. Next on the chopping block is the mighty country of Russia. Anything that helps you out in Russia is obviously so beneficial because you can lose a lot of points if you guess the wrong side of the country. Another thing to note is that there's not that much coverage in the north of the country, and there is quite a bit around the city of Surgut. And that area is actually quite easy to remember because it almost always has sand on the side of the road in that area. So if it looks white and sandy like this, you can pretty much guess there and you'll have a good success rate. Here's another example of what it looks like. This one has a lot of sand, especially in Generation 3 coverage where you have the long antenna. There seems to be a lot of sand along the road a lot of the time. Use it with caution because obviously sometimes you will have sand in other areas of the country, but if it feels like Siberia and you see this much, then Surgut should be a pretty easy send. Okay, next up we're going to talk about the south coast of Kenya, which actually has quite a bit of coverage, and the south coast of Kenya definitely looks different to what you'd see around Nairobi and the west of the country where you see more red soil. Well, down over here near Mombasa, you see much more white soil and many more palms. So let's see how it looks. So this is kind of an average Mombasa round. You see this white soil on the side of the road. This is generally speaking how the rounds will look. And then, as I said, most rounds you'll see quite a few palms. This is maybe more than normal, but yeah, definitely you'll see these thin palms that are quite tall, and that's because we're near the water. So combine the fact that we have the white soil with the palms and you should be good. Okay, next up we're moving to the massive country of Indonesia. This is another country where the more accurate the guess, the better, especially because the area is so large. And yeah, I'm going to talk about the island of Sumba right now, which has a super distinctive landscape. It almost feels a bit like the African plains or some grasslands or something like that. So here's what I mean. As you can see, this dry landscape is not typical for the rest of Indonesia. We have this dry grass all around the spot. We have these kind of thin fences that are often made of trees, which is super interesting. And we have this kind of grassland vibe, which is just definitely doesn't look like it fits in Indonesia. Also, you should keep an eye out for architecture because you could confuse this with another country completely. But for example, here we have quite an Indonesian looking roof, and that would definitely help you out. And here's another example. Again, we have this kind of tree fence going on here, and just a very interesting and dry landscape. Not typical for Indonesia, so consider Sumba or maybe even the surrounding islands when you have a round that looks like this, but you think it's in Southeast Asia. Okay, next up, we're going to go slightly southeast here, and we're going to look at the area surrounding Darwin. Now, Darwin looks like nowhere else in Australia because of how very green and vibrant it is. So as you can see here, we have a very, very vibrant and green landscape compared to what you normally have in Australia. It's obviously quite tropical. We have trees like these combined with like thinner looking eucalyptus trees everywhere, and the leaves just feel a bit different, but overall, just look at how green it is and how dark the soil is, and with that combination, you should be fine. Not to mention the fact that we often have these metal poles with the holes in them at the bottom to help you out even more. Here's another example. This one's a bit further out into the country, but again, we have this super green grass, this quite red soil, and these thin trees everywhere. That should mean you're in the north end of the Northern Territory. Next up, we've got Roraima in Brazil. Now, this state can be confused with others, but once you get the hang of it, you'll see that it is the most different of all the states in Brazil. So let me just show you what it looks like here. We've got these flat grasslands mixed with tall mountains in the background. So you can see in the foreground, everything is quite flat. You have these small trees and you have a lot of grass. In a way, you normally don't really see in Brazil. And in the background, you see, yeah, scattered trees and then big mountains as well. And also I can say very typically, although we didn't see it in the last location, in this one, you can see rocks everywhere on the side of the road. That's also very Roraima. And you can see, again, we have this kind of grassland, but then in the distance, we do have these very tall mountains. And normally you can see locations where it's completely flat, but normally you will see at least some elevation in the background, and it just looks quite unique. If you find this place in a duel or something like that, you're going to destroy your opponent. So I highly recommend just going and taking a look around on Google Street View, seeing if you can recognize it. You should be able to, and you can get great scores. Our next country is Canada, and particularly the Northwestern Territories. So as per this relief map, you can see that Yukon Territory is much more mountainous than Northwestern Territories. Northwestern Territories, especially where the coverage is, which is up here on this road, is much flatter than the Yukon side. So you can immediately use that as a clue. However, on this road, you see this incredibly unique landscape, which has a lot of these really thin trees and then a lot of like orange foliage on the side of the road. And as you head further north, it gets even more distinct here. The trees are extremely low here because we're so far north in latitude. We have some hilliness to it, but yeah, it just has a kind of feel that you don't see elsewhere in the country, I feel. This one might be the most typical one I found, just these stubby trees stretching into the distance. You should be able to get the Dempster Highway based on that. Okay, we're once again using the relief map here, and we're checking out Slovakia. As you can see, Slovakia is a very mountainous country, and you have this whole flat region south of Nitra here, which is just especially flat. It is true that you get some flat regions near Košice, but when you're right here on the Hungarian border, you can actually have rounds where you see no mountains at all, which you should not see anywhere else in Slovakia. This is typically how it looks. It looks like a Czechoslovak round, but with just no hills at all, and it is quite unique. This also extends to the other side of the border in Austria, where you also have a very uniquely flat landscape around Vienna and Bratislava. Okay, let's talk about another flat region of a country. As you can see, Mexico is a very mountainous country. You do have some flatness along the east coast here, but generally speaking, up and down the whole country long, you at least have some hills. The exception to that is the Yucatan Peninsula here, which is very flat. Not only that, in addition to the flatness, you have all these rock walls, which can basically be found everywhere in the Yucatan. They're extremely helpful for getting that region of the country, and when you see this many rock walls, you should not be anywhere else. On top of that, you can also see these thatched roofs on the Yucatan Peninsula, and that is really useful for identifying the region as well, although these might stretch a little bit further than the rock walls. Next up is Serbia, which is another country where the relief map is going to be our friend. As you can see, the whole south of Serbia here is completely covered in mountains, and the north is very flat. You do have this one ridge south of Novi Sad, which is really quite small anyway, and then as soon as you hit Belgrade, then you have everything hilly south and everything flat north. And this part over here is dead flat, I'm telling you guys. So let's take a look at how that looks here, and you can see just not a hill to be seen. Actually, that might be the ridge down there south. Yeah, we're looking south here. That is the ridge that I was talking about, but apart from that, it is dead flat, and that is a really nice tip for getting northern Serbia. Definitely do combine that with the fact that the car should have no antenna most of the time, and you're golden. Okay, next up we're talking about Bolivia, which is a country with relatively sparse coverage. As you can see here, the coverage only extends to the middle region of the country, and most of that middle region is actually inside the desert. Sucre, Cochabamba, and La Paz all mostly consist of dryness. However, over here in the Santa Cruz de la Sierra region, you have all the green coverage. So this road extending out on the 4, then the Santa Cruz region, and this road up here are the only places where you can see really green stuff. And also it's flat there. You do get some green coverage on this south road here on the 9, but that's also mountainous, and so it should be much easier to recognize. So let's see how it looks. It's quite green, it's forested, it's very flat, as I said. And yeah, this landscape should be pretty recognizable, I think, once you've seen it a few times. Then also inside the city, it's still green, it's still quite nice and lush, but also you have this hexagonal pavement, which is very common in that part of the world. Bolivia uses it a lot, and especially Santa Cruz. Okay, finally here we're going to talk about Portugal, but not this Portugal. The Portugal that is the Azores and also Madeira. So Funchal and San Miguel, this island here, are both very green and have very hilly landscapes, as you can see here. It could fool you for a lot of different places in Europe, but this is kind of how it looks. It's often covered in Generation 2 camera, and you have these rolling hills that just don't feel quite right because they're so lush and green. And here's an even better example of what it looks like right here. And the best thing to keep in mind is these purple flowers. This type of purple flower here and this type of purple flower here. I actually have these growing in my backyard, so they must grow well in Australia as well. But yeah, if you see these everywhere, that should indicate that you're somewhere on one of these islands. They're basically never seen on mainland Europe, and I think they're much rarer in the Canaries too, so you can basically go for Portugal when you see these purple flowers everywhere. Okay, that is about it. I hope these landscapes helped you out, and I hope you got something from the video. Thank you very much for watching all the way to the end. Do give the video a like if you did enjoy it, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Till then, goodbye.